So we know that the final tranche of the state capture report is expected to be released sometime this week. At the same time, news of the arrest in Dubai of two of the Gupta brothers, wanted in connection with large-scale state capture and corruption, is giving more impetus to the push to get to the bottom of state looting. Former UK MP and veteran anti-apartheid activist Lord Peter Hain has been outspoken about the culpability of multinational companies and large consultancy firms aiding and abetting the fleecing of state resources. And he joins us now. Good evening, Lord Hain. So the Gupta's arrest, it's certainly there are many questions that they will have to answer in connection with state capture if we are able to successfully extradite them. You've spoken out very strongly about the need to bring international companies who fed into the system to book as well. Do you see the arrest of the two Gupta brothers as key to getting to the bottom of this system?
It's a very important step, and it should have happened a long time ago. And I don't know why the Dubai authorities, the UAE government, didn't do this earlier, because the Gupta brothers, as we know, have been spending the looted money, billions of rands, on lavish weddings for their sons in India and other such activities, buying expensive houses and smuggling the money away. And it's going to be quite difficult to quite difficult to find. So I'm really frustrated. I should think with a lot of people in South Africa following this, that it hasn't happened earlier. But given that it has happened, what is important now is that the UAE, which has an extradition treaty with South Africa, extradites these individuals quickly so that they can be brought before the courts and face the full force of the law as they need to. Because under former President Zuma, they were complicit in absolutely monumental criminal looting, as we know, and as the Zondo Commission has confirmed in all its detail. But the wider picture is that you will not put a stop to this kind of thing, to another episode of state capture in South Africa or some other country, unless the governments of the world stop talking the talk about blocking corruption and money laundering and actually walk the walk. And they're not doing that, London included. The British government is not really hounding those global institutions. The latest one that I've pushed, including in the House of Lords yesterday, is for them to deny Bain & Company any public sector contracts, any taxpayers' contracts that the government is handing out, as it has done to Bain in recent years, anymore. These companies have got to feel the heat. Or otherwise they'll do it again.
Yeah,
and the money laundering and corruption only occurred because of the global corporate complicity.
Yes, and there's almost this veneer of respectability if you're a multinational consultancy company. And as we've seen with Glencore just in the last few weeks, now of course not implicated in state capture here in South Africa, but very much implicated and admitting to bribery and corruption in other countries, now facing over $1 billion in fines. Do you think that developments like that suggest that the tide is turning against these big multinationals who are not playing by the rules?
Well, I hope so, Sally, because they've got to understand that if they want their global reputations to be maintained, if they want to do business across the world in a reputable way, then they've got to act in a straight way and not a dishonest, corrupt one, as Glencore has clearly been doing. And that's true for all of the global corporates implicated in the state capture 10 years of looting. The KPMGs, the McKinseys, the SAPs, of course, Bain & Company, HSBC Bank, Standard Chartered Bank, Bank of Baroda Bank. They were all complicit in this. The money would not have been able to leave the country by the billions of rands if it hadn't been through the digital pipelines of these three banks, and then to go to Dubai or to Hong Kong, and then to be channeled elsewhere. The Guptas and the Zumas could not have done what they did on the scale that they did were it not for brand names that are known across the world and claim to be reputable companies acting in this dishonest and corrupt and complicit way. So I hope that the arrest of the Guptas. I hope that the Zondo Commission's findings, which have been very compelling, will actually put the heat on these companies as well. Because I was very struck when I exposed this international dimension in the House of Lords now 3.5 years ago, that the 4.5 years ago actually, that the companies, when they appeared on the front pages of the Financial Times in London and the Wall Street Journal in New York and Washington, then they started flying over to London to talk to me and started saying, "Oh, we agree we've done something wrong." When it was just a South African story that you guys were focusing on, and the politicians, opposition politicians, were seeking to find out about, and brave investigative journalists, then KPMG and McKinsey and HSBC didn't really mind. So they've really got to be held to account, and the governments of the world have got to cooperate together, otherwise you'll never stop this.
I want to ask you a final question, Lord Hain, on another issue. What is your view of the British government's plan to fly refugees out of the United Kingdom to Rwanda? The British government says it is the only way to stop the criminal gangs that are preying on these desperate migrants and transporting them very unsafely across the sea.
I think that's simply untrue. And it's an appalling policy to effectively deport people who are fleeing oppression, fleeing for their lives, seeking a new life, bringing their kids over in rugged dinghies, desperately dangerous, to find themselves safely onto the beach on the south coast of England, and many don't make it, of course, because it's so dangerous, and they pay out a lot of money to these people traffickers, and then to find themselves stuck on a plane and transported to Rwanda. With all due respect to Rwanda, that is not what these people risk their lives and their whole futures for. They wanted to come to a country in which they might feel safe, and they should be processed here properly and see whether their claims for asylum are correct and are lawful, and then be given the opportunity to stay. And of course, one of the consequences of many consequences, terrible consequences of Britain leaving the European Union, of Brexit, is that in the past, under the Dublin Treaty, those refugees landing in another European country could have been sent back to the other European country, France or Spain or wherever it might be. And now, of course, they can't, because we've left the European Union, and there's shameless policy of dumping the problem onto an African country, paying Rwanda hundreds of millions of pounds to do so, rather than actually settling these people in Britain, giving them the chance to build a new life. Many of them are highly skilled, many of them want to work, they don't want to sponge. I mean, this is on every account, this is a terrible policy that the British government has pursued, amongst the other terrible policies that it's pursuing, including tearing up an international agreement with the European Union over Northern Ireland that I feel particularly strongly about, and which is threatening the peace process there.
Well, Lord Peter Hain, we are going to be live to London this evening, also going live to Kigali. Thank you so much for your views this evening. Former UK MP and veteran anti-apartheid activist, Lord Peter Hain.